So this back and forth, like rewriting, reformatting, and ultimately transforming patch 5.0's writing went on until March of 2025. Like, so no major complaints here, all going smoothly aside from my usual annoyance of not doing things faster. So around the beginning of March, Twitch sends out a warning email to all of its content creators. They were nuking their video section of their site. To be specific, they were essentially reducing the amount of video storage on Twitch to 100 hours. Anyone who plays video games and store video game footage on Twitch knows that that is essentially nothing. That's nothing. You might as well have no capacity. In short, cursing my own stupidity of laziness of just throwing everything on Twitch, I was screwed. However, this was compounded by the fact that my philosophical journey had finally been altered by John Vervaeke's 50-episode lecture series, insofar as the core point is I was finally convinced to read Heidegger's Being in Time. Originally, and this is actually fairly common, when understanding that Heidegger was indeed a Nazi, I do mean this literally, I did not want to engage with his works. Looking back, this was something extremely foolish and something I will greatly expand on in later videos. In this case, being in nothingness was already extremely difficult for me, as Sartre brought heavy baggage from difficult continental positions. Therefore, being in time might as well be a jump into the incomprehensible to me. Simply, this was like studying a new language, both linguistically and phenomenologically. Not only did I need to understand the language, but I needed to be able to employ it in the philosophical system to have mastery over the philosophy. To be clear, for someone not classically trained in philosophy, moving into being in time revealed all my flaws in my initial engagement with philosophy. And as such, this was what made it a nightmare to read. So to keep both things in mind then, the Twitch VOD apocalypse and the Herculean struggle with a specific philosophy warped my mentality to constant anxiety versus the initial optimism I started with in working with Shadowbringers. Okay, so in this case, the core question you might have is this: why did this completely halt the progress of the Shadowbringers rewrite? As such, the reality of the VOD apocalypse needs to be addressed, in as much the 30 to 40 days deadline before the Twitch system automatically deletes all of your videos needed to be urgently addressed by me. Using Twitch's system was out of the question. You see these video sizes? Okay, so I want you to imagine requesting over 100 different videos on Twitch over 20 hours, with each 20-hour plus video requests taking hours and hours to respond. In addition, using Twitch's browser download option, this will, ultimately clicking on that button will lead to the will it, won't it, finish tension of downloading something like a 20 or 30 gigabytes, which, after that I reviewed my writing, is actually more like something like requesting like a 100 gigabyte file from Twitch's servers, which is even more absurd. This isn't a fun game to play, trust me. So Twitch's function, okay, and advice to use its video uploading system directly to YouTube only works for highlights that are under 12 hours. In other words, what they failed to specify is the fact that uploaded videos cannot be uploaded to YouTube using this function. I must re-download all my VODs and re-upload them as such. To put it bluntly, I would have never made the video apocalypse deadline using purely Twitch's functions. Of course, this leads to the third-party tool with our salvation, in one being an open source Twitch downloader. While it is our savior, it operates specifically as an FFmpeg downloader, which you see there. Simply, it downloads off of 5-second video segments as a scan and download index and will catalog and complete the whole video as at its completion. Running multiple downloads is highly intensive on the CPU, the RAM, on the input and output of reading and copying data, and on my internet bandwidth. To expand on the absurdity, during this entire 2 to 3 week process, my streaming PC had about 5 different types of blue screen errors from simply being overwhelmed with the download output. Not to mention, I had to spend like $1,000 Canadian on external SSDs. Okay, so on top of this is the finalization of the videos. Okay, so this included checking the video and audio works, and nothing was wrong with the videos. Some files refused to finalize, and I needed to get to the bottom of why. So lots of troubleshooting the exact reason of the failure. And 3, if there's ultimately no problem, I had to catalog the videos accordingly for upload and usage purposes. So I'm giving you such extensive detail to highlight the fact of why I was locked out of actually just simply continuing the writing. Therefore, as far as dealing with the VOD apocalypse during that time was this constant 5-minute on, 5-minute off type of deal, where I had to actively repeat all the process, everything I just said, that process I mentioned again and again, which was highly disruptive to my creative output. Additionally, as an additional element to this, I refused to let go of the philosophical wrestling I was engaged with in being in time. In other words, these 2 to 3 weeks in March were purely dedicated in tackling Heidegger's philosophy. You might be surprised to hear this, even though I highlighted my lack earlier. For all my efforts, I was progressing at a rate of 5 to 10 pages a day. So in being hit with the VOD apocalypse, I realized I had foundationally misunderstood something about Heidegger, forcing me to reread the past 150 pages of progress I've made as I dealt with the systemizing of getting these videos localized on my hard drives. This is, of course, a blow to my confidence, as it felt quite embarrassing to be making the amount of philosophical progress I was actually making as before. I was already never satisfied with the speed I was working on this project. To be clear, this is not to signal some form of like defeat or how I had a major depression or something, but it signals a highly stressful and anxiety-filled March that was exceedingly unfun. So it stemmed additionally from the direct annoyance that was actually getting really close, before the VOD apocalypse hit, really close to finishing the goal of making videos of 6.4 and 6.5, and I was actually going to finish all the videos on the job quests, which got inevitably furlonged by an entire month. In the midst of the trial that life had thrown like me, philosophically, there was a metamorphosis. There was a foundational breakdown, as in my epistemological and ontological core in my approach to philosophy. Here, to explain simply, meant the realization I was reading all these philosophers and philosophies, and those you see in the back, propositionally, in this tacit, modern Western-centric education system of, oh, I'm going to memorize these propositions, all these ideas are interesting, blah, blah, blah. So when, in fact, this was in my opinion, antithesis to the famous existentialist motto, existence precedes essence. Thus, transformed, not even at the end of being in time yet, I ultimately caved on a point that I was sitting on for a while. This is George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel's phenomenology of a spirit. In my naive earlier spirit, similar in my avoidance of Heidegger, Hegel is a monumental figure in philosophical history. The reason, of course, of why you don't hear about him, because he is the very figure of an ivory tower philosopher, to which you will get no simple self-help prescriptions from him. He is obviously infamous for the density of his philosophical language he uses. So what you will usually see from Hegel is sort of this inherent mockery that Hegel was just being convoluted for the sake of being convoluted. Like he was this con man philosophical comment, which isn't quite true in any capacity.